Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to open to questions. I want to ask one first, maybe just to bring us back to this idea of experience, and specifically maybe thinking of performance. Of course, obviously very strong in your work, Uwe, performance in a sense that there's theatrical influences coming in, but maybe also the visitors as performers. There's an active process here that visitors are making meaning, as you say, in an active way, and similarly in interactive ways. So could you speak about the role of visitors as performers in an exhibition?
Yes, I think it's definitely necessary, especially for long-lasting and sustainable experiences. For example, if we don't create a certain awareness, if we don't address it to the visitors and he or she can perceive it individually, we will not go further or deeper down than the surface. So if we treat the visitor as a consumer, there's always an orchestra pit in between. There's always a gap in between. And I think we should overcome this gap, and this only, I think, can be achieved by very early and very strong and intimate collaboration with the curators. So none of our ideas are coming from our own sofa. All the ideas are created and elaborated with the curators.
Okay, good. TC.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, I often use the kind of the metaphor that we try to make, like, give the visitors superhuman powers. Just like in a computer game, if you have a skateboarding game, you can do stunts that us mere mortals normally cannot. So it's still, like, the digital experience is also very much curated. So it's not that people are just left at their own devices, but it's still, so they have the strong sense of free will, but it's still guided by the system. So I think this is very, very, very good way of giving this sense that you're on the stage and you can do crazy things and you can learn a lot, but at the same time you don't get lost in the quantity, which is often the problem when you dump all the digital archive into the exhibition, or all the archive in the digital form into the exhibition.
Yes, or in physical form, as you say. Yeah. Okay, so over to the audience. Is there a microphone up there, or do I need to run around with this one? We have a second one. Okay, so now I look for hands up, people who want to ask questions. Always the first one. It takes a moment. Yeah, in the back on that side. Yeah.
So, yeah, before the microphone reaches the one addressing a question to us. I mean, it's a very good example here. Gio Ponti, an Italian designer in the late 1960s, said, the difference between a theater and an exhibition is that you can walk around the story. And I adopted this. I think it's a very, very precise and detected and interpretation of what is the difference. Because you are fixed to your chairs, we can move around. We can move around this showcase here. So we, as an audience, are the anarchistic factor. And this is what I love. I'm coming from theater, from opera to be precise, and this is what I love working on exhibitions. It's this anarchistic factor, so that automatically the audience plays a role. I mean, for me, the major role. Yeah.
So the question there.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for both for great presentations. This question is really come to my mind when I listened to Jussi's presentation, but actually it's for both. So for me, I work in the City Museum in Finland, in Helsinki, and for me, using high-tech solutions, one of the biggest challenges is really that, Uwe, you said that, okay, you have to, build the bridge between with the makers and the curators, but I think there's even bigger bridge to build, and it's the curators and makers are on the same side, and then there is a public on the other side, because there is a huge amount of people who are a little bit afraid or suspicious about these technological problems and solutions, not problems, but solutions. And for example, I really like these examples you showed from London and Denmark. But then again, when I saw it didn't look, the machine, the viewer, it didn't look frightening, but I know that many visitors just don't want to touch them, or said, okay, it might be something interesting. But then if you just have, for example, the skeleton of the dinosaur and you don't touch this, you don't even try the viewers. So how can you be sure that people do that, the visitors do that in the museum?
Yes, how do you invite them in to use these things and to engage? Maybe first you.
So it's a very good point. It's you have few seconds to catch the visitor at the beginning and give them the sense of empowerment, so that they know what is possible. Which for me actually, so my background is more coming from media culture on one hand, but interaction design on the other. And for me, working in exhibitions context or media in public spaces, for me, it's a playground, because I get to constrain the technological, like I can play with expensive things or things that are meant for general purpose use, and I limit the purposeness to one thing, because instead of having one computer and 1,000 applications, I have one application and 1,000 users. So I can kind of fix all the constraints so that you can, the door through which you enter, already shows where you're going. You don't need to, you can mask out, the same way, you really curate it. You limit all the degrees of freedom to the essential. And this way you can give the superhuman power. So for those viewers that they're standing in space, actually, for the Natural History Museum, there's a third one on the floor with the pointer, mechanical pointer. So the same content that is on the screen, on the other ones, you can also interact on the floor. Turns out lots of groups love that, because it's also a shared experience. So there's one is using and the other ones are looking over the shoulder. Lastly, from psychology, there's operant learning is something that you learn by looking at somebody else doing. So this is very much happening also in the museum. So when there's people, some is the brave one, and the other ones see what happens, and they all already know what to do then.
Yeah, good. Not pouring content into a computer screen to do lots of things, but the narrowly focused interactions and experiences. Uwe.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. I stay with you. That's okay. Okay. Thank you both for such wonderful presentations. Mr. Bruckner, you speak of taking the virtual to the real and the real into the virtual. One of the big things for my research is that getting away from the barrier process of using a mobile device is having to look at your world, your exhibit, actually through that device, and the whole idea of steppage. Yep. Downloading an application, connecting to a wireless network, and using that and only that device to actually see your world. And a lot of constituents that I've spoken to, they constantly say that audiences and designers aren't exactly ready to use those devices instead of using sensing your body. What is your take on the whole proponent of using mobile devices, which is a constant annoyance for me?
Yeah, let me give an example. I have two daughters, 21 and 17.
Thank you. Okay.
You can keep the mic. I have two daughters, 21 and 17, and they are my major critics, by the way. And they are brought up, they stand up with Facebook in the morning and they go to bed with Twitter, or I don't know what kind of social systems I even don't want to know it. But they are perceiving differently. And now I'm coming back to your question. My 21-year-old daughter said, "Daddy, why should I go to a museum if I can withdraw it from the internet 24 hours? So you must make amends. Hey, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches. I must make amends." Janis Joplin sang this already in the 1960s. It means Sometimes we use media to put attention, to draw attention, and to attract the people to come. And very often, and this is a similar thing, this is also a reason why we are working together, we're doing it not for the media's sake, but to open up new doors that you can't offer otherwise. But still, I deeply believe in a real sex instead of virtual. So museum is real sex. It needs your physical presence. Yeah, and this is fantastic, that's unique. And I think we even do not really use it to the maximum of extent. So there's enough spare room for research, and I think it's worthwhile not to trust media too much. Trust yourself more than the media. It's you that should be addressed.
Can I just, yeah, thank you. Just add one brief comment, because my PhD research on mobile technologies in museums, what I found was designing not technologies, not things, not applications, not software, but designing activities to structure the use of people's technology, for example. So do you want to add a quick comment on this one? No. We go to the next one, which is up there somewhere.
Yes, hello. I'm Leena Hannula, Head of Education at the Sinebrekov Art Museum Finland, Finnish National Gallery. I'm taking my baby steps in augmented reality, but what you were talking about, these experience spaces, so I've made research about that, and one big thing is that when you look at the paintings, for instance, from postcards, or you're taking photos of them, and you come to the museum, they are just opposite. Big paintings are very small, and very small paintings are very big, because it's because of the media. But my next question actually is that now you have made us all very sick. You know, it's beautiful to see what you have been doing. How can we learn that? You said that it's very expensive to do that kind of things, and on the other hand, museums are trying to do everything very economically. Are there any online learning experiences? So how do you teach us in the future?
Yes, practical questions.
Well, maybe first, quick practical answer to that. Well, I said that that's the precondition. So the context is that the expectation is that media and technology is always expensive. But then what I tried to show with the Iceland example, for example, is that it doesn't have to be, that you can really find elegance if you can navigate between nudging the technology and nudging the content and the interaction in like a closed loop system. What I think is that, so talking about museums or any physical space, again, back to Uwe's importance of really being there as a physical person, I think that's what we have in designing exhibitions and museums, that we have the real thing that you cannot put into the small screen, or if you use the small screen then you should design it in the loop of also being there physically. So don't try to replicate the thing you have into a small screen, but maybe you can use the small screen to give context, give a perspective, reminders. Like, I read this later when you're at home, because it's easier to read when you're at home rather than standing in a dimly lit exhibition case. So more like this, so it's balancing where to tell what and take the best of the real, not to be apologetic about it.
Okay.
Two answers. First one, the media budgets are relative. I give you an example. After more than 10 years, we refurbished the LED lights in the House of History in Stuttgart. After 10 years, the first interactive floor plan based on capacity field was working for more than 10 years without maintenance. Though, if you recalculate this, it was very cheap. Second answer, how can you learn this, or what kind of programs can we offer? So I do workshops, not only with my students, but also with curators and with museums or institutions, from 5 hours on to 3 days. It depends on the impact, the intended impact, and there we do exemplary case studies where we try to find out where the obstacles are and where the potentials are. By the way, there are much more potentials than obstacles, according to my perception. This may open up the bridges or the other bridges these gentlemen mentioned before. And I think the major tasks that we have to face in the future is that we perceive the museum itself like a medium. It's a format, a cultural format that itself is a medium. Yeah, and it's not a shop. It's a sophisticated place for challenges and for windows offering access to hidden secrets and sophisticated places.
Excellent. A perfect way to wind up. I think you said earlier, a museum as a window to secret worlds. So thank you both very much.